On a German airfield in 1944, a captured American fighter sits waiting. It wears enemy markings, but the paint cannot hide what it truly is. A test pilot climbs into the cockpit, expecting to find weaknesses. Instead, he discovers something that will shatter everything German aviation believes about itself. The truth is undeniable at 444 miles per hour. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun rises over Brandenburg, Germany on July 20, 1944. The air is warm and still. On the concrete runway of Rechlin Airfield, a fighter plane sits waiting. But this is not an ordinary German fighter. The aircraft wears Luftwaffe crosses painted on its wings. But the paint job is crude, rushed. Underneath, you can still see traces of American stars. The olive-green color looks foreign here, out of place on a German military base. This is a P-51D Mustang. An American fighter. And it should not be here. Walking toward the aircraft is Hauptmann Werner Thierfelder. He is a test pilot, one of Germany's best. For 4 years, he has flown every type of aircraft the Luftwaffe captures. Soviet Yaks. British Spitfires, American Thunderbolts. His job is simple: fly enemy planes and find their weaknesses. Tell German pilots how to beat them. But today will be different. Thierfelder circles the Mustang slowly. He studies it the way a wolf might study unfamiliar prey. Or perhaps the way prey studies a predator. He is not sure which one he is today. The fuselage is narrow. More slender than the sturdy Focke-Wulf 190s he normally flies. His hand touches the wing's leading edge. The surface is incredibly smooth. German engineers have heard about this American laminar flow wing design. They have tried to copy it. They have failed. The wing feels almost too thin, too delicate. American philosophy, Thierfelder thinks to himself. Build it light. Build it fast. Build 10,000 of them. For 4 years, Werner Thierfelder has served Germany's Air Force. First as a fighter pilot shooting down RAF bombers. Later as a test pilot at this secret base north of Berlin. He has flown captured Soviet fighters that handled like tractors with wings. He has tested British Spitfires that turned beautifully but ran out of fuel too quickly. He has evaluated the American P-47 Thunderbolt, a massive fighter that German pilots nicknamed the Jug because it looked like a milk jug. But this aircraft is different. The reports from the Western Front have been troubling. Luftwaffe pilots are encountering a fighter that seems to break all the rules. According to German engineering theory, a long-range escort fighter should not be possible. The fuel weight needed for long distance should make the plane too heavy to fight well. Yet somehow, American bombers are flying all the way to Berlin and back. And the fighter protecting them is beating Germany's best planes in combat. This Mustang was forced down near Aachen 2 weeks ago. The Packard-built Merlin engine failed after what the pilot reported as fuel contamination. He belly landed in a field. The aircraft slid to a stop mostly intact. German ground forces captured it before the pilot could destroy it. Within hours, it was being transported east, away from the front lines, toward Rechlin. Thierfelder's orders are clear: evaluate the aircraft's performance. Identify its strengths and weaknesses. Find something German pilots can exploit. He climbs onto the wing and slides into the cockpit. The first thing he notices is the seat position. It sits higher than in German fighters. The visibility is exceptional. The canopy is a bubble design, one piece of curved plexiglass with no framework blocking the view. He can see in almost every direction. In a Messerschmitt Bf 109, the heavy canopy frame creates blind spots. Here, there are none. The instrument panel spreads before him. Everything is labeled in English. Someone has added small strips of paper with German translations. Manifold pressure. Fuel mixture, coolant temperature. The layout is logical. Everything within easy reach. American ergonomics, he notes. They design for the pilot. We design the pilot to fit the aircraft. He studies the throttle quadrant. The throttle is on the left side, which will take adjustment. German fighters place it on the right. But the position feels natural once his hand finds it. Below the throttle, the mixture control and propeller pitch lever. The Americans use a constant speed propeller. It automatically adjusts blade angle to maintain optimal RPM. Another example of their philosophy: automate what can be automated so the pilot can focus on fighting. The technical specifications have been documented by Recklin's engineering staff over the past week. Engine, Packard V1650-7, producing 1,490 horsepower at war emergency power with water methanol injection. Propeller, Hamilton Standard 4-blade unit, 11 feet in diameter. Weight empty, 7,040 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight, 12,100 pounds. Armament, 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing. No cannons, unlike German practice. The Americans have chosen volume of fire over hitting power. In combat, Luftwaffe pilots report that the Mustang's guns are devastatingly effective. Firefelder signals to the ground crew. They move to their positions around the aircraft. No one is entirely certain this American engine will start reliably with German fuel. The Merlin is particular about fuel quality. It requires high-octane gasoline that Germany can no longer produce in sufficient quantities. They are using captured American fuel for this test. He follows the startup procedure that has been translated and posted in the cockpit. Fuel mixture, rich. Throttle, cracked open 1 inch. Magnetos, both. His thumb finds the starter button. The engine turns over once. Twice, catches. The 4-blade propeller begins to rotate. Slowly at first, then spinning into an invisible disc. The Merlin sound fills the air. A deep, smooth rumble, fundamentally different from the harsher mechanical snarl of a Daimler-Benz DB605. There is a refined quality to it. An impression of precision manufacturing and careful tolerances. The British designed this engine in the 1930s as a racing power plant. Then they adapted it for the Spitfire. The Americans took the design, improved the manufacturing process, and produced it in quantities that German industry cannot match. This troubles Thierfelder more than he cares to admit. He has been raised on the mythology of German technical superiority. The Reich's propaganda has spent years saying German engineering is the world's finest. The early victories of 1940 and 1941 seem to confirm this. German tanks overran Poland and France. The Luftwaffe swept aside the Polish Air Force. But 1944 tells a different story. The Luftwaffe is losing pilots faster than they can be trained. Aircraft production is actually increasing. Factories are producing Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs in record numbers. Yet German fighters are being destroyed faster than they can be replaced. Not because of manufacturing capacity, but because of the quality gap in both machines and pilots. American pilots arrive over Germany with 200 to 300 hours of flight training. German pilots now receive 30 to 50 hours before being thrust into combat. Thierfelder begins his taxi, steering the Mustang toward Recklin's main runway. The tail wheel is steerable, linked to the rudder pedals. Visibility over the nose is adequate. Better than in the Bf-109 with its narrow landing gear. He performs his pre-takeoff checks. Flight controls, free and correct. Trim tabs, set for takeoff. Fuel selector, main tank. Mixture, rich. Propeller, full forward. The tower clears him for departure. He turns onto the runway, aligns the nose with the centerline, and advances the throttle smoothly forward. The acceleration is immediate. Powerful. The Merlin's power pushes him back into the seat as the Mustang surges down the concrete. The tail comes up quickly, improving visibility dramatically. Airspeed indicator climbing, 60 miles per hour. 80, 100. 120. At 140 miles per hour, Thierfelder eases back on the stick and the Mustang lifts cleanly into the air. The runway falls away beneath him. 1,300 feet of takeoff roll. His Focke-Wulf 190 typically requires 2,000 feet. Already an advantage. Gear up. The landing gear retracts into the wings with a solid thunk. And then, immediately, Thierfelder feels something unexpected. The Mustang accelerates as if released from chains. There is no struggling against drag. No sense of the aircraft fighting to convert power into speed. It simply goes. The airspeed needle climbs steadily. 160 miles per hour. 180, 200. 220. He is barely at 5,000 feet altitude and already the Mustang is moving faster than many German fighters at their maximum velocity. The aircraft climbs out over the Brandenburg countryside. Passing through 6,500 feet. 8,000 feet. Thierfelder makes small inputs to the controls, feeling the Mustang's responses. The ailerons are light but effective. He can bank the aircraft with minimal effort. The elevator is smooth. No tendency toward pitch sensitivity. The rudder requires little input even in climbing flight. This is an aircraft designed for long missions, he realizes. Everything about the handling suggests an emphasis on pilot comfort and reduced fatigue. A German fighter demands constant attention. Constant small corrections. The Mustang seems content to fly itself while the pilot scans for enemies. At 10,000 feet, he levels off and begins systematic evaluation. Gentle turns to the left. To the right, steeper banks. The Mustang responds predictably. There are no bad habits. No tendencies toward snap rolls or spins. It is almost boringly stable. Which is exactly what you want for a fighter that must escort bombers through hours of flight into hostile territory. Then he opens the throttle to maximum continuous power and pushes forward slightly on the stick. The response is extraordinary. The airspeed indicator climbs with alarming speed. 220 miles per hour. 250, 280. 300. The Mustang is still accelerating. 340, 380. 400. At 15,000 feet altitude, the aircraft reaches 444 miles per hour. 444 miles per hour. Thierfelder has flown the Focke-Wulf 190A-8, one of Germany's premier fighters. That aircraft achieves a maximum speed of approximately 406 miles per hour at optimal altitude. The Messerschmitt Bf 109G can barely exceed 386 miles per hour under ideal conditions. This American fighter is not marginally faster. It is faster in a way that fundamentally changes air combat. A 40 miles per hour speed advantage means a German pilot cannot catch a fleeing Mustang. Cannot escape a pursuing Mustang, cannot dictate when to fight. The American pilot chooses when to fight and when to leave. The German pilot has no choice but to accept whatever the Mustang pilot decides. For years of war have taught Thierfelder that speed in combat aviation is not just about going fast. It is about controlling the engagement. The faster aircraft decides whether combat occurs. In fighter versus fighter combat, this is decisive. He thinks about the young German pilots he has trained. Boys really, with barely enough hours to master basic flying. They are being sent up against American pilots who have spent months perfecting their skills. And now those Americans are flying an aircraft that is superior in almost every way. It is not just unfair. It is a death sentence. The thought troubles him deeply. These young men look up to him. They trust his guidance. They believe in the superiority of German engineering because men like him have told them it is so. But sitting in this cockpit, feeling the Mustang's effortless power, he knows the truth. The myth is dead. Perhaps it was always a myth. He pushes the nose down and begins a climb test. Advancing the throttle to war emergency power. The water methanol injection system activates. The Merlin's roar deepens as it generates its full 1,490 horsepower. The Mustang climbs strongly through 16,000 feet. 20,000 feet. German fighters begin to lose performance at these altitudes. Their single-stage superchargers struggle to compress the thinning air. The Mustang's two-stage supercharger maintains power output. 23,000 feet. 26,000 feet. At altitudes where Messerschmitts become sluggish, where Focke-Wulfs labor to maintain speed, the Mustang feels entirely comfortable. The controls remain effective. The engine produces smooth, reliable power. This is the aircraft's element. 30,000 feet. 33,000 feet. At 33,000 feet, the Mustang is still climbing at over 13 feet per second. This explains everything. The combat reports are not exaggerated. They are probably understated. American heavy bombers operate at 23,000 to 26,000 feet altitude. The Mustang escorts operate above the bombers. Between 30,000 and 36,000 feet, where they can dive down onto any Luftwaffe interceptors climbing to attack. German pilots must climb through the bomber formations. Through concentrated defensive fire from hundreds of machine guns. Then engage the fighters at an altitude where their own aircraft are struggling. While the Mustangs are operating in their optimal range. It is not a fair fight. It was never designed to be a fair fight. Firefelder levels off at 26,000 feet and begins maneuverability tests. He rolls the Mustang left, then right. The controls remain crisp, responsive. He pulls into a climbing turn. The G-forces press him into the seat. The aircraft holds the turn without wallowing. He reverses, rolling right and pulling hard. The Mustang responds immediately. This is where he expects to find the weakness. Long-range fighters traditionally sacrifice maneuverability for endurance. The extra fuel weight should make the aircraft less competitive in a turning fight. The Spitfire turns beautifully but carries fuel for barely 2 hours. The American P-47 Thunderbolt has excellent range but fights like the heavy aircraft it is. The Mustang seems to ignore this rule. It turns with authority. Not quite as tightly as a Bf-109 at low altitude. But far better than any long-range fighter should turn. And at altitude, where thin air reduces the effectiveness of the 109 small wing, the Mustang's larger wing area provides superior lift. Up here, above 23,000 feet, the Mustang might actually outturn a Messerschmitt. He continues the evaluation methodically. Slow flight, stable, with adequate stall warning through buffeting. The stall itself is gentle with no wing drop. Recovery is straightforward. High-speed handling, the aircraft remains stable. No flutter. The controls become heavier at high speed but remain predictable. This is good design. Heavy controls prevent the pilot from overstressing the airframe at high velocities. Now for the critical test, high-speed diving characteristics. German fighters have a troubled relationship with diving attacks. The Bf-109 in particular suffers from compressibility problems at high speed. As the aircraft approaches the speed of sound, shock waves form. The controls lock up. The aircraft enters a dive from which the pilot cannot recover. Luftwaffe pilots have died this way. Training emphasizes caution. Do not pursue a diving enemy beyond certain velocity limits. Firefelder points the Mustang's nose downward. 15 degrees below the horizon. 20 degrees. 30 degrees. He advances the throttle, adding power to the dive. The airspeed indicator begins its climb. 310 miles per hour. 340, 370. The aircraft remains stable, tracking straight down. 400, 430. He steepens the dive to 45 degrees. The ground below grows larger in the windscreen. 460 miles per hour. 480, 500. The controls remain responsive. He can feel pressure on the stick, but the ailerons and elevator continue to function. There is no buffeting. No sense of impending failure. The Mustang is diving at over 500 miles per hour and it feels controlled. Almost routine. At 510 miles per hour, Thierfelder pulls back firmly on the stick. The aircraft responds immediately. The nose rises. The G-forces build. 3 GS. 4 GS. Pressing him down into the seat. The dive flattens. Transitions to level flight, then into a climb. The Mustang sheds speed rapidly and settles into level flight at 13,000 feet. No structural complaints. No control problems. No surprises. This is the piece that completes the picture. A Luftwaffe pilot who tries to escape a Mustang by diving will not escape. The Mustang can follow him down. Remain controlled at speeds where German fighters become unresponsive. And still have power to climb back up afterward. There is no safe escape. Every tactical option German pilots have relied upon for 4 years has been nullified by this single aircraft design. Speed, altitude, diving attacks, all useless against the Mustang. Thierfelder begins his descent back toward Rechlin, throttling back to conserve fuel. The Mustang still carries nearly 70% of its internal fuel after 40 minutes of aggressive flight testing. The fuel management is extraordinary. The internal tanks hold 269 gallons of fuel. Add 2 external drop tanks of 110 gallons each, and the total reaches 489 gallons. This translates to a combat radius of approximately 750 miles with drop tanks. The Mustang can fly from England to Berlin, a distance of nearly 600 miles, escort bombers over the target, engage in combat, and return to England. No German fighter can make this claim. The Bf-109G has a combat radius of approximately 200 miles. The Focke-Wulf 190A manages perhaps 320 miles with a drop tank. German fighters must operate close to their bases. They scramble. Climb to intercept altitude. Engage the bombers. Land to refuel. If they are drawn away from their bases by American escorts, they must break off combat before fuel runs out. The Americans have no such constraint. They can remain over German territory for hours. Always present. Always a threat. The strategic implications are devastating. He enters the landing pattern at Rechlin. Reduces power, extends the landing gear. The Mustang slows smoothly. Flaps down. Over the runway threshold. Throttle to idle. Gentle back pressure. The main wheels touch the concrete. The tail settles. The Mustang rolls out straight and true. 47 minutes of flight time. 47 minutes that have fundamentally changed Thierfelder's understanding of the air war. He taxis back to the dispersal area where ground crew and engineers wait. He shuts down the engine. The Merlin winds down with a decreasing whine. He sits in the cockpit for a moment, alone with his thoughts. The leather seat is still warm. The controls are still in his hands. But the flight is over. And with it, perhaps, any remaining illusion about German air superiority. He organizes his thoughts. The report he must file must be precise, technical, and honest. But there is another dimension to what he has just experienced. He has just flown an aircraft that represents a complete rejection of everything German aviation doctrine assumes about long-range fighter design. The Rechlin facility has been testing captured Allied aircraft since the war began. Early Soviet fighters were crude but effective. British Spitfires were impressive but limited by short range. American P-47 Thunderbolts were powerful but heavy. Each aircraft had clear strengths and identifiable weaknesses that German fighters could exploit. The P-51D Mustang has strengths in every category and no exploitable weaknesses. It is faster than German fighters at all altitudes. It climbs better above 20,000 feet. It dives better at all speeds. It turns adequately for combat. It has range that makes German fighters look like training aircraft. It has better visibility than any Luftwaffe fighter. And this is perhaps the most difficult part, it is not produced in small numbers by master craftsmen. It is mass-produced in American factories. Thousands of aircraft rolling off assembly lines at a rate German industry cannot match. Over the following 3 days, Thierfelder and his team compile their formal evaluation report. Performance Summary. Maximum speed at 15,000 feet, 444 mph service ceiling, 41,900 feet rate of climb at sea level, 3,200 feet per minute combat radius with drop tanks, 750 miles endurance at cruise power, 4 hours 15 minutes. Comparative analysis against Focke-Wulf 190A8, the Mustang is faster at all altitudes. Climbs better above 20,000 feet. Dives better. Has triple the combat radius. The FW-190 has heavier armament with cannons. Overall assessment, Mustang superior in most combat scenarios. Against Messerschmitt Bf 109G6, the Mustang is faster at all altitudes. Climbs better above 16,000 feet. Dives significantly better. Has triple the combat radius. The Bf 109 has advantage in sustained turn rate at low altitude. Overall assessment, Mustang superior in most combat scenarios. Tactical implications, the P-51D represents a fundamental shift in fighter design. German fighters prioritize heavy armament and competitive performance at 10,000 to 20,000 feet. The Mustang achieves its performance through aerodynamic efficiency and an exceptional engine matched to an optimized airframe. Most significantly, the aircraft's range allows it to escort American heavy bombers to any target in German-controlled territory. Luftwaffe fighter pilots can no longer wait for bomber escorts to reach their fuel limits and turn back. The escorts never turn back. The report includes technical appendices. Detailed photographs, analysis of the supercharger system, documentation of fuel management. German engineers study every aspect of the design looking for insights. But here is the bitter truth the report cannot explicitly state. Even if German designers could replicate every feature tomorrow, Germany lacks the industrial capacity, the raw materials, and the time to produce such an aircraft in meaningful numbers. The Mustang's engine requires high-octane fuel that Germany cannot produce in sufficient quantities. The Reich's synthetic fuel production is already under heavy bombing. By autumn 1944, German fighters will be grounded not because they lack aircraft, but because they lack fuel. The Mustang's construction uses aluminum alloys that Germany must import at great expense. American industry produces aluminum in quantities that dwarf German output. A single Mustang requires approximately 1,000 hours of labor to construct. American factories are producing them at a rate of more than 400 per month. German fighter production struggles to replace combat losses. And even if Germany could build a Mustang equivalent, there are no pilots to fly them. New German fighter pilots receive 30 to 50 hours of flight training. Their American opponents have 200 to 300 hours of training. The Americans are not just winning the technological race. They are winning the industrial war, the resource war, and the training war simultaneously. Thierfelder's report makes its way through Luftwaffe bureaucracy. It reaches headquarters of Jagdkorps, the fighter command. It is read by staff officers. It is noted, filed, and archived. What the report cannot change is the fundamental strategic situation. By July 1944, the Luftwaffe is fighting a defensive war it cannot win. The test flight at Rechlin is merely confirming what combat statistics already prove. In July 1944 alone, the Luftwaffe lost approximately 450 fighter pilots. A catastrophic rate that training programs cannot replace. American losses are also significant. But American training schools are producing pilots faster than they are being lost. German training produces pilots slower than they are dying. The Mustang is not simply a better fighter aircraft. It is visible proof of American industrial, technological, and organizational superiority. It is proof that the United States can design, produce, and field a weapons system that surpasses German equipment while producing it in quantities that make German production look trivial. On July 25, 1944, 5 days after Thierfelder's test flight, the captured Mustang is flown again. This time by a different pilot who wants to verify the findings. The results are identical. The aircraft performs exactly as documented. There are no surprises. No hidden weaknesses to exploit. The Mustang sits at Rechlin through August and into September. Occasionally flown, frequently studied. German engineers photograph every detail. Measure every dimension. Analyze every aspect of its construction. They learn much about American design philosophy and manufacturing techniques. But they cannot replicate it. Not with the resources available. Not with the time remaining. By October 1944, Allied forces are approaching Germany's western border. The Rechlin facility, once deep inside German territory, is now within range of Allied fighters. The captured aircraft must be evacuated or destroyed. The specific fate of the P-51D tested by Thierfelder is not conclusively documented. Most likely it was destroyed in place as Soviet forces approached Brandenburg in spring 1945. Perhaps it was abandoned when Rechlin was evacuated. Perhaps it was damaged in an Allied air raid and scrapped. Whatever its end, the aircraft disappears from history in the chaos of Germany's collapse. Werner Thierfelder survives the war. He is captured by American forces in May 1945. He spends several months in a prisoner of war camp before being released. In post-war interviews conducted by Allied intelligence officers, he speaks candidly about his experiences at Rechlin. When asked specifically about the P-51D Mustang, his response is clear. It was the finest all-around fighter of the war. Superior to the Focke-Wulf 190. Superior to the Messerschmitt 109. Superior even to Germany's jet-powered Me-262 in most practical combat scenarios because the Mustang was reliable, available in quantity, and could be flown by moderately trained pilots with confidence. This admission must have been difficult for a man trained in the mythology of German technical supremacy. But Thierfelder was above all a test pilot. A profession that demands honesty and the ability to report unpleasant truths. His evaluation of the Mustang was not influenced by national pride. It was the product of 47 minutes in the cockpit of an aircraft that redefined what a fighter could be. The story of German test pilots flying a captured Mustang is not simply about aircraft performance. It represents a collision between ideology and reality. Between propaganda and measurable truth. The Third Reich built much of its identity around claims of technical superiority. German engineering was presented as inherently superior. This was not just marketing. It was propaganda that Germans themselves believed. The Luftwaffe's early successes seem to confirm this. In 1939 and 1940, German fighters dominated Polish and French opposition. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 was genuinely world-class. But the Battle of Britain revealed the first cracks. The Supermarine Spitfire proved equal to the Bf 109. British pilots inflicted unsustainable losses on the Luftwaffe. Still, the narrative of German superiority could be maintained. The Bf 109 was upgraded. The Focke-Wulf 190 introduced in 1941 was genuinely superior to the Spitfire Mark V. What changed between 1941 and 1944 was not German technological decline. German fighters continued to improve. What changed was the nature of the opposition. The Soviet Union began producing fighters in enormous quantities. The United States brought industrial capacity that dwarfed German production. American factories produced over 96,000 fighters during the war. German production totaled approximately 55,000 fighters. But American aircraft were not merely numerous. By 1943 and 1944, they were technically superior. The P-51 Mustang represents the culmination of this evolution. It was not the first American fighter. It was the synthesis of multiple technological advances. British aerodynamic research. British engine design. American manufacturing expertise, American operational experience. North American aviation began designing the Mustang in 1940. The first prototype flew in October, just 120 days from contract to first flight. This rapid development was possible because they drew on existing knowledge rather than attempting revolutionary innovation. The original Mustang, powered by an Allison engine, was fast at low altitude but lacked high-altitude performance. The breakthrough came when someone suggested installing the Merlin engine in place of the Allison. The combination was transformative. The Merlin's two-stage supercharger maintained power at high altitude. Suddenly the Mustang became fast at all altitudes. The P-51B first flew in December 1942. It demonstrated performance that exceeded all existing fighters. The P-51D, with its bubble canopy, refined the design further. By mid-1944, when Thierfelder flew the captured example at Rechlin, the Mustang was being produced at over 400 aircraft per month. Total P-51 production would eventually exceed 15,000 aircraft. This industrial capacity was itself a weapon. Even if German fighters achieved favorable kill ratios, the mathematics favored the Allies. The Americans could lose aircraft and replace them within weeks. The Germans could not. But the captured Mustang at Rechlin forced German test pilots to confront something more difficult than numerical inferiority. They had to acknowledge that the American aircraft was genuinely better. Better in ways that could be objectively measured. The Mustang was faster. This could be verified with a stopwatch. It climbed better at high altitude. This could be measured with instruments. It had longer range. This could be calculated from fuel consumption. It handled well. This could be felt through the control stick. Every measurement reached the same conclusion. The Americans had out-engineered Germany. This was not supposed to be possible. According to Nazi ideology, Americans were culturally inferior. Their society was weakened by democracy and diversity. How could such a nation produce technology superior to the German Reich? The cognitive dissonance must have been profound for true believers. For pragmatists like Thierfelder, the evidence was simply evidence. Uncomfortable perhaps, but undeniable. When Werner Thierfelder landed the captured Mustang at Rechlin after 47 minutes of flight testing, he possessed information German leadership desperately needed. He had verified that combat reports were accurate. The Mustang was as good as Luftwaffe pilots claimed. In fact, it was probably better. But information without the capacity to respond is simply another form of defeat. The Luftwaffe could not build a Mustang equivalent. Could not train enough pilots, could not produce enough fuel, could not defend the industry that produced fighters. Knowing you are losing is not the same as being able to prevent loss. The captured Mustang at Rechlin became a symbol of the gap between German assumptions and Allied realities. It sat on a German airfield wearing Luftwaffe crosses. But it remained fundamentally American. The paint did not change its performance. The markings did not alter its capabilities. It was evidence of American achievement that exceeded German capabilities. In post-war analyses, historians and engineers have extensively studied the Mustang's impact. The consensus is clear: the P-51D was one of the most important aircraft of the war. Arguably the single most important Allied fighter in the European theater. Its introduction in large numbers in early 1944 coincided with the collapse of effective Luftwaffe opposition. This was not coincidence. The aircraft enabled the strategic bombing campaign that destroyed German industry. It achieved air superiority over Germany. It forced the Luftwaffe into a defensive posture from which it never escaped. And it did this while being simpler and cheaper to produce than many German fighters. For German test pilots at Rechlin, this lesson was delivered through the control stick of a captured Mustang. The intellectual understanding that Germany was losing the air war became physical reality through 47 minutes of flight testing. Werner Thierfelder continued his work through the final months of the war. By early 1945, his work had become academic. There was little fuel, fewer pilots, and no realistic prospect of victory. He witnessed the evacuation of Rechlin as Soviet forces approached. The test facility was abandoned. The captured aircraft collection was destroyed. The Mustang he had flown disappeared in this chaos. After the war, Thierfelder participated in debriefings with Allied intelligence. These interviews produced remarkable documentation as German pilots candidly discussed their experiences. The consensus among Luftwaffe test pilots was striking. The P-51D Mustang was the finest all-around fighter aircraft of World War II. Some German pilots argued that specific aircraft had advantages in particular scenarios. The FW-190 had heavier firepower with its cannon armament. The Bf-109 could outturn opponents at low altitude. The Me-262 jet was faster in straight-line speed. But when evaluated across all performance categories, speed, altitude, range, handling, reliability, ease of production, the Mustang stood supreme. This admission represented a complete reversal of what German pilots had been taught. They had entered the war believing German aviation was inherently superior. That German engineering represented the pinnacle of human achievement. That enemy aircraft were inferior copies of superior German designs. The mythology ran deep. It was reinforced by early victories. By propaganda. By a culture that celebrated technical achievement as evidence of racial superiority. To acknowledge that an American aircraft was fundamentally better required abandoning that entire worldview. For true believers in Nazi ideology, this was impossible. They found excuses. They blamed shortages of fuel, shortages of pilots, shortages of time. They claimed that Germany would have won if only resources had been different. But for men like Thierfelder, trained in objective measurement and scientific evaluation, the evidence was incontrovertible. The Americans had simply outdesigned Germany. They had taken existing technologies, British engines, established aerodynamic principles, proven manufacturing techniques, and synthesized them into something better than the sum of parts. This was not miracle technology. It was good engineering combined with industrial capacity and operational experience. The Mustang's laminar flow wing was based on NACA research publicly available before the war. The Merlin engine was British, already proven in the Spitfire. The armament was conventional. The avionics were standard. What made the Mustang exceptional was integration. Every component worked together seamlessly. The engine matched the airframe perfectly. The fuel system provided extraordinary range without compromising handling. The design was optimized for mass production without sacrificing quality. This integration reflected something deeper than technical skill. It reflected an organizational culture that valued practicality over ideology, results over doctrine, and honest assessment over propaganda. American engineers could admit when something didn't work and try a different approach. The original Allison-powered Mustang had been disappointing at high altitude. So they changed engines. Simple, effective. German engineering culture often struggled with such pragmatism. There were exceptions, brilliant designers who could adapt and innovate. But the system as a whole was rigid. Ideologically constrained. When Hitler demanded miracle weapons, engineers promised miracle weapons whether possible or not. When the Führer favored bombers over fighters, resources flowed to bombers regardless of strategic reality. The Mustang represented a design philosophy freed from such constraints. It was built to solve a specific problem: escort American bombers deep into German territory. Every aspect of the design served that mission. Nothing was included for prestige or ideology. No heavy cannons to impress inspectors. No symbolic features to satisfy politicians. Just ruthless focus on the mission requirement. Range, speed, altitude, performance, reliability. Ease of pilot transition. Maintainability in field conditions. Cost-effective production. The Mustang excelled in all these areas because American designers were allowed to focus on them without interference from ideological considerations. The P-51 Mustang that sat at Rechlin in summer 1944 was more than just a captured enemy aircraft. It was proof that the technological race was over. That American industrial and engineering capability had surpassed German achievement. That the mythology of inevitable German superiority was exactly that, mythology. And Germany had lost. Not just the air war. Not just the production war. But the fundamental contest of systems. Democratic capitalism with its messy inefficiencies and competing interests had produced better results than totalitarian central planning with its supposed discipline and focus. The evidence sat on the runway at Rechlin, painted with crude Luftwaffe crosses that could not disguise its American origins. 444 miles per hour. Faster than anything Germany could field. No Luftwaffe fighter could match it. And every German test pilot who flew the captured Mustang knew this with absolute certainty.